The wagon wheels kicked up dust as they rolled away, and 10-year-old Lily Carter stood barefoot on the scorched earth, watching the only people she knew disappear into the shimmering heat. Her feet were bleeding. The sun bore down like a hammer on an anvil. They'd left her with nothing but a crust of bread and the words her father had whispered before he died. Keep moving. The trail stretched endlessly in both directions. Behind her, emptiness. Ahead, more emptiness. She took one step, then another, each one searing her skin. This is where her story begins. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Lily's story travels. And if this opening grabbed you, hit that like button and stay until the very end. The heat wasn't just oppressive, it was alive. It pressed down on the Wyoming plains with a physical weight, bending the air into liquid waves that danced above the cracked earth. Lily Carter stood motionless for a long moment after the wagon disappeared, her small chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. The dress she wore, once blue, had faded to the color of dirty sky. It hung loose on her thin frame, torn at the hem where it had caught on a wagon wheel 2 days prior. She was 10 years old, and she was alone. The family that had taken her in after her father's death, the Hutchinsons, had made their decision somewhere between dawn and mid-morning. Lily had heard them arguing in hushed voices while she pretended to sleep in the back of the wagon. Mrs. Hutchinson's voice had been sharp, insistent. "We can't afford another mouth. Not with winter coming. Not with our own to think about." Mr. Hutchinson had said nothing in response, and that silence had been answer enough. When they'd stopped to water the horses, Mrs. Hutchinson had told Lily to get down, told her to wait, said they'd be back shortly. Lily had known immediately it was a lie, had seen it in the woman's eyes, in the way she wouldn't meet her gaze. But she'd climbed down anyway, because what else could a child do? Now the wagon was gone, swallowed by distance and heat and the indifference of the wide-open world. Lily looked down at her feet. They were bare. The Hutchinsons had taken back the 2 small boots they'd lent her, said they needed them for their own daughter. Blood seeped from cuts along her heels and the balls of her feet where the rough ground had already begun its work. She had the piece of bread they'd left her, hard as a rock and barely bigger than her palm. And she had her father's words, the last thing he'd ever given her. Keep moving. She didn't know where the words had come from or why they mattered. Her father had been a quiet man, a freight hauler who'd spent more time with horses than people. He died of fever 3 months ago, his body burning up in a canvas tent while Lily held his hand and begged him not to leave. In his final moments of clarity, he'd gripped her hand hard enough to hurt and whispered those 2 words. Keep moving. So she did. The first steps were agony. The earth was baked hard and littered with stones, and each footfall sent sharp pain shooting up through her legs. She bit down on her lip hard enough to taste blood, but she didn't stop. Stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant understanding that she had no water, no shelter, no direction, and no hope of surviving more than a day in this heat. She kept moving. The landscape offered nothing. No trees for shade, no streams for water, no buildings on the horizon. Just endless rolling plains covered in dry grass and sage, broken occasionally by formations of red rock that shimmered in the distance like mirages. The sky was a bleached white blue, empty of clouds, empty of birds, empty of mercy. Lily's throat was already dry. She'd had water that morning, a few sips from the Hutchinsons' canteen, but it felt like a lifetime ago. The sun sucked moisture from her skin, her lips, her eyes. She tried to produce saliva but couldn't. The piece of bread in her hand felt like a cruel joke. She couldn't eat it without water. It would turn to paste in her mouth and choke her. She walked for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. Time stretched and compressed strangely in the heat. Sometimes she felt like she was moving through syrup, each step taking enormous effort. Other times she'd snap back to awareness and realize she'd covered distance without remembering it, her body moving on its own while her mind drifted somewhere else. Her father appeared to her once, walking beside her in his worn duster coat, his hat pulled low against the sun. She turned to look at him, and he smiled, actually smiled, which he'd rarely done in life, and said, "You're doing fine, Lily girl. Keep moving." Then she blinked and he was gone, and she understood that her mind was starting to fracture under the heat. The pain in her feet had evolved beyond sharp and specific. Now it was a constant burning throb, each step adding to a symphony of hurt that seemed to encompass her entire body. She could feel blisters forming and popping, new ones rising immediately in their place. Blood mixed with dust and caked onto her skin. She tried not to look down. Looking down meant seeing how bad it was, and seeing meant accepting, and accepting meant giving up. She kept moving. The sun climbed higher directly overhead now, beating down without angle or mercy. Lily's vision began to swim. Dark spots appeared at the edges, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. Her breath came in short gasps that burned her throat. She could feel her body starting to shut down, could feel the heat winning. A voice in her head, her own voice, not her father's, whispered the truth she'd been avoiding. "You're going to die out here." The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it brought a strange floating calm. Maybe dying would be easier than this. Maybe stopping would be a mercy. She could just sit down in the shade of one of those rock formations, close her eyes, and let the heat take her. It would be quick, peaceful, even. But her feet kept moving. She didn't decide to keep walking. Her body simply refused to stop, driven by something deeper than thought or will, some animal instinct that wouldn't surrender even when surrender made sense. One foot in front of the other. Again. 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 That's when she fell. Not a stumble this time, but a complete collapse. Her legs simply gave out, folding beneath her like wet paper. She hit the ground hard, felt stones dig into her palms and knees, felt the breath explode from her lungs. The impact should have hurt, but she was beyond feeling specific pains now. Everything hurt. Nothing hurt. The distinction no longer mattered. She tried to push herself up and couldn't. Her arms shook with the effort, and then gave out. She lay there on the burning ground, cheek pressed against dirt that felt like it had been pulled from a kiln, and thought, "This is it. This is where it ends." The darkness at the edges of her vision began to spread inward, cool and inviting. She could hear a sound like distant thunder, or maybe rushing water, or maybe just her own blood pounding in her ears. Her father's voice came again, softer this time. "I'm sorry, Lily girl. I'm so sorry." The darkness came closer, a blessed relief from the burning white light of the sun. And then, hooves. Not imagined, not a hallucination, real hooves, striking the hard ground in a steady, purposeful rhythm. Growing louder, coming closer. Lily tried to lift her head but couldn't, tried to call out but had no voice left. She managed to move her fingers, a tiny gesture that meant nothing to anyone but herself. "I'm here. I'm still here." The hoofbeats stopped. Bootsteps now, quick and heavy, crunching across the ground, coming toward her. A shadow fell across her face, blessedly cool, blocking out the sun. Through the swimming darkness in her vision, Lily saw a shape, tall, broad-shouldered, backlit by the white-hot sky. A man's voice, rough with shock and something that might have been anger. "Jesus Christ!" Lily tried to speak, managed only a dry whisper that scraped out of her throat like sandpaper. "Keep moving." Strong hands slid beneath her, lifting her from the burning ground. She felt herself being raised up, cradled against a chest that smelled of leather and horse and sweat. The movement should have hurt, everything hurt, but somehow it didn't. Somehow it felt safe. The man's voice again, closer now, speaking to her in a tone that was surprisingly gentle. "I've got you. You're all right now. I've got you." Lily's eyes fluttered, trying to focus on the face above her. She saw a jaw shadowed with stubble, dark eyes that held something fierce and protective, lips pressed into a hard line. He looked angry. Not at her, at the world, at whoever had left a child to die in the heat. She tried to thank him, but the darkness was winning now, pulling her down into cool relief. Her last conscious thought wasn't fear or pain or even gratitude. It was wonder, simple, childlike wonder, at the fact that someone had stopped. Someone had actually stopped. Well, Caleb Rowan wasn't a man given to second-guessing his decisions. 38 years of living had taught him to trust his instincts, to act quickly when action was needed, and to never waste time on regrets. But as he kicked his horse into a hard gallop, the dying child in his arms, he found himself seized by a fury so profound it took his breath away. Who leaves a child in the open heat? What kind of person makes that choice? He knew the answer, of course. He'd seen it before. People who had too little and chose who would survive and who wouldn't. People who convinced themselves that abandonment was different from murder, that walking away wasn't the same as pulling a trigger. People who told themselves they had no choice, when what they really meant was they'd chosen not to see another option. The girl in his arms weighed almost nothing. Her skin was burning hot to the touch, her breathing shallow and rapid. He could see the ruins of her feet, could see how far she'd walked before her body gave out. The sight of those torn, bloody feet did something to him, cracked open a place inside his chest that he'd thought sealed shut years ago, because someone once should have stopped for me. The thought came unbidden, a memory he'd long since buried. He was 7 years old again, standing in a similar heat, watching his mother's wagon pull away after she'd sold him to a ranch for $20 and a bottle of whiskey. He remembered the feeling, not sadness, not fear, but a hollow confusion. The understanding that he'd been weighed and found wanting, that he wasn't worth keeping. Caleb shook the memory away and focused on the present. The girl needed water, shade, medical attention. His ranch was another 20 minutes at full gallop. He urged the horse faster. The animal responded gamely, hooves pounding the earth in a steady rhythm. Caleb adjusted his hold on the child, trying to shield her face from the sun with his hat. She stirred slightly at the movement, her eyelids fluttering. "Stay with me," he said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "Just a little longer." Her lips moved, forming words without sound. He leaned closer, trying to make them out. "Keep moving." 2 words, whispered with the last of her strength. 2 words that felt like a punch to his gut. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's right. We keep moving." The ranch appeared on the horizon, a sprawl of buildings clustered around a main house, corrals spreading out in all directions, windmills turning lazily in the hot air. Caleb had built it himself over 15 years, acre by acre, board by board. It was the largest cattle operation in the territory, employing 24 men and running several thousand head. It was proof that he'd survived, that he'd made something of himself despite being abandoned and sold and told he'd never amount to anything. And it was empty. Oh, the bunkhouses held workers, and the foreman kept the operation running smoothly, but the main house, the sprawling 2-story structure with its wraparound porch and room after empty room, held only him. He'd built it thinking he'd fill it someday. Fill it with what? He'd never been quite sure. A wife, maybe. Children. A family of his own to replace the one that had discarded him. But the years had passed, and the house had stayed empty, and Caleb had grown comfortable with solitude. Or told himself he had. He pulled the horse up outside the main house and dismounted in one smooth motion, still cradling the girl. His housekeeper, Martha Santos, appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a stout woman in her 50s, unflappable and efficient, the only person Caleb trusted with the running of his household. Her eyes widened when she saw the child in his arms. "Sweet Mary," she breathed. "What happened?" "Found her on the north trail," Caleb said, mounting the porch steps. "Collapsed in the heat. She's burning up. We need to get her temperature down and get water in her." Martha held the door open, already moving into action. "The blue bedroom. It's the coolest room in the house. I'll get water and cloths." Caleb carried the girl upstairs to a room he'd furnished years ago but never used. It had a large bed with a wrought iron frame, lace curtains that filtered the harsh sunlight into something softer, and walls painted a pale blue that somehow made the space feel cooler. He laid her gently on top of the quilt, and that's when he got his first real look at her. She was small for 10. He guessed her age from the length of her limbs, with tangled brown hair that had probably been lighter before sun and dirt had darkened it. Her face was burned and peeling, her lips cracked and bleeding. But it was her feet that made him want to put his fist through a wall. The soles were shredded, layers of skin torn away to expose raw flesh beneath. Blood had dried in dark patches mixed with dirt and fragments of stone. Martha arrived with a basin of cool water and an armful of clean cloths. She took one look at the girl's feet, and her mouth set in a hard line. "Who did this?" she asked quietly. "Don't know," Caleb said. "But I'd like to find out." They worked together in efficient silence. Martha began sponging the girl's face and arms with cool water while Caleb carefully cleaned her feet, working as gently as he could to remove the dirt and debris without causing more damage. The girl stirred occasionally, whimpering in her sleep, but didn't wake. "We need to get water in her," Martha said, "but we can't do it while she's unconscious. She'll choke." "How long until she wakes up?" Martha shook her head. "Could be hours, could be days, if the heat got to her brain. We just have to wait." Caleb nodded and settled into a chair beside the bed. Martha gave him a long look. "You planning to sit there all night?" "If that's what it takes." She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "I'll bring you coffee and something to eat, and I'll check on her every hour." After Martha left, Caleb sat in the quiet room and watched the girl breathe. The sun moved across the sky, the light through the curtains shifting from harsh white to warm gold to deep amber. The house settled around him, floorboards creaking, the windmill outside turning with a steady creak and groan that had become so familiar he barely noticed it. The girl's breathing gradually slowed, deepened, became more regular. The heat in her skin began to subside. These were good signs, Martha assured him when she checked in, but she still didn't wake. Night fell. Caleb lit a lamp and turned it low, just enough to see by. Outside, he could hear the sounds of the ranch settling in for the evening, cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in their corrals, the low voices of men finishing their work for the day. Normal sounds, comforting sounds. Inside this room, though, nothing felt normal. Caleb wasn't a man who spent much time examining his own motivations. He did what needed doing and didn't agonize over why. But sitting here in the lamplight, watching this broken child struggle to survive, he found himself confronting questions he'd avoided for years. Why had he turned back? He'd been miles past her when something made him look over his shoulder, made him notice what might have been just a pile of rags on the trail if he hadn't looked twice. What made him wheel his horse around and ride back? What made him get down from the saddle and check? Because someone once should have stopped for me. That thought again, insistent now. True. When he was 7 and his mother left him, no one had stopped. The ranch owner who'd bought him had worked him like an animal until he was big enough to fight back. When he'd run away at 14, no one had come looking. When he'd nearly frozen to death that first winter on his own, no one had found him in time. He'd saved himself, crawling to a trapper's cabin and breaking in to survive. He'd learned early that the world didn't stop for abandoned children, that you saved yourself or you didn't get saved. But he'd stopped today. He'd turned back. And now this girl was in his house, in his care, and he had no idea what happened next. Around midnight, she stirred. Her head moved on the pillow, and a small sound escaped her throat. Not quite a word, but close. Caleb leaned forward. "Easy," he said quietly. "You're safe." Her eyes opened. Gray eyes, he saw now, the color of winter sky. They were unfocused at first, confused. Then they found him, and he saw awareness return, saw her remember, saw fear flash across her face. "It's all right," he said, keeping his voice level and calm. "You're at my ranch. You collapsed out on the trail. I brought you here." She stared at him for a long moment, processing this. Her lips moved, forming words that came out as a dry whisper. "You came back." The words hit him harder than they should have. "Yeah, I came back." "Why?" It was the same question she'd managed to ask him out on the trail, before she'd lost consciousness. And he still didn't have a good answer. Or maybe he had the only answer that mattered. "Because someone should have," he said simply. She absorbed this, her gray eyes never leaving his face. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it. "Thank you." Caleb nodded. "You need water. Think you can drink?" "I'll try." He helped her sit up, supporting her back with one arm while he held a cup of water to her lips with the other. She drank in small sips, coughing occasionally but managing to keep it down. When she'd had enough, he eased her back against the pillows. "What's your name?" he asked. Lily Carter." "I'm Caleb Rowan. This is my ranch." She looked around the room for the first time, taking in the comfortable furnishings, the clean space, the soft lamplight. Her expression was hard to read, not quite wonder, not quite disbelief, something closer to cautious confusion. "The people who left you," Caleb said carefully. "Do you know where they were headed?" Lily's face closed down immediately, and he saw her age in that moment, saw that despite being 10, she'd already learned not to trust easily, not to give information that could be used against her. "They weren't my people," she said finally. "They just took me in after my father died. They couldn't afford to keep me." The casual way she said it, the flat acceptance in her voice, made Caleb's jaw tighten. "So they left you in the heat to die. They said they'd come back. Did you believe them?" Lily met his eyes, and he saw the answer there before she spoke it. "No." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a coyote called in the distance, and another answered. The lamp flickered, casting moving shadows across the walls. "How far did you walk?" Caleb asked. "I don't know. A long time." "Your feet are in bad shape. It's going to take a while for them to heal." Lily looked down at her bandaged feet, as if seeing them for the first time. "I couldn't stop," she said quietly. "My father told me to keep moving, so I did." "Your father?" Caleb started, then stopped. Tell me about him. And so she did. Haltingly at first, then with more confidence, Lily told him about James Carter, the freight hauler who'd raised her alone after her mother died in childbirth, about the wagon routes they'd traveled together, just the two of them and a team of horses, about the fever that had taken him 3 months ago, burning him up in 2 days despite everything Lily had tried to do. She told him about the Hutchinsons, who'd agreed to take her in because they'd known her father, about Mrs. Hutchinson's growing resentment as the months passed, the way she'd started rationing Lily's food, giving her smaller and smaller portions, about the morning they'd told her to get down from the wagon and wait. Caleb listened without interrupting, his anger building with every detail. When she finished, he said simply, "You're safe here. You can stay as long as you need to heal." Lily studied him with those two old eyes. And then? Then we figure out what comes next. "You don't have to keep me," she said, and there was no pleading in her voice, no manipulation, just a statement of fact. "I know I'm just another mouth to feed." Caleb felt something crack in his chest. "Is that what they told you? That you were just a burden? Wasn't it true?" He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, and looked at her directly. "Listen to me, Lily. What happened to you wasn't about you not being worth keeping. It was about them not having the courage to keep you. There's a difference." She absorbed this silently, neither accepting nor rejecting it, just filing it away to consider later. "Get some rest," Caleb said, standing. "We'll talk more in the morning." He made it to the door before her voice stopped him. "Mr. Rowan?" He turned. "Yeah?" "You said someone should have stopped for you, too." She paused. "Who left you?" Caleb felt the question land in his chest like an arrow finding its mark. For a moment he considered deflecting, changing the subject, shutting down the conversation. But something about the way she was looking at him, direct and honest and unafraid, made him answer truthfully. "My mother," he said, "when I was 7, sold me to a ranch for drinking money." Lily nodded slowly as if this made perfect sense, as if she'd suspected something like this all along. "Did anyone come back for you?" she asked. "No." "Did you survive anyway?" "Yeah, I did." She smiled then, the first smile he'd seen from her, small and fleeting but real. "Good," she said. "That means I can too." Caleb found himself smiling back. "Yeah, I expect you can." He left her then, closing the door quietly behind him. Martha was waiting in the hallway, her arms crossed, her expression knowing. "She's going to stay, isn't she?" Martha said. It wasn't really a question, but Caleb answered anyway. "For now. Until she's healed. Until we figure out what's best." Martha nodded. "I'll make up the room properly tomorrow. Get her some clothes that fit. She'll need shoes too once those feet heal enough to walk on." "Thank you, Martha." She reached out and squeezed his arm, a rare gesture from a woman not given to displays of affection. "You did the right thing, bringing her here." After she left, Caleb stood alone in the hallway of his too-big house and wondered if that was true. He'd stopped because he'd seen himself in that collapsed child on the trail, but saving her from the heat was the easy part. What came next? That was where it got complicated. He'd built this ranch from nothing, built it with his own hands and his own will, proving to himself and the world that he was worth something, that he mattered, and he'd done it alone because alone was safer. Alone meant no one could leave you. Alone meant no one could decide you weren't worth keeping. But now there was a 10-year-old girl sleeping in his blue bedroom, and the house didn't feel quite so empty anymore. Caleb walked downstairs and out onto the porch. The night air was finally cool, a relief after the punishing heat of the day. He stood there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of his ranch, and tried to imagine what the morning would bring. Behind him, through the open window of the blue bedroom, he heard Lily's voice, soft and drowsy, talking in her sleep. "Keep moving," she whispered. "Keep moving." Caleb closed his eyes and made a decision. He didn't know if it was the right one. Didn't know if he was equipped to care for a damaged child who'd been left to die. Didn't know if he could be what she needed. But he knew what it felt like to be abandoned. Knew what it meant when someone stopped when everyone else kept riding. And he knew that sometimes survival wasn't the end of the story. Sometimes it was just the beginning. The morning came with a gentleness that felt wrong after the brutality of the day before. Soft light filtered through the lace curtains, painting patterns across the blue walls. Lily woke to the sound of birds and the distant lowing of cattle, sensations so foreign after months of sleeping in a cramped wagon that for a moment she couldn't place where she was. Then memory returned. The heat, the collapse, the man who'd come back, and she pushed herself upright despite the protest from every muscle in her body. Her feet throbbed with each heartbeat, sending waves of pain up through her legs. She looked down at the bandages, white and clean, and wondered what her feet looked like underneath. The door opened quietly. Martha entered carrying a tray, her expression shifting from concern to relief when she saw Lily awake. "Good morning," Martha said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "How are you feeling?" Lily considered the question. She hurt everywhere. Her skin felt tight and hot where the sun had burned it. Her throat was raw. But she was alive, and she was inside, and there was food on that tray that smelled better than anything she'd eaten in months. "Better," she said, because it was true in the ways that mattered. Martha smiled. "Mr. Rowan said you were tough. Let's see if we can get some breakfast in you." The breakfast was simple but abundant. Scrambled eggs, toasted bread with butter, sliced peaches that must have come from Martha's preserves. Lily ate slowly, her stomach unused to so much food at once. Martha watched her with the careful attention of someone assessing damage, cataloging needs. "We'll need to change those bandages after you eat," Martha said, "and I've brought you some clothes. They're old things of mine from when I was younger, but they should fit well enough until we can get you something proper." "You don't have to," Lily started, but Martha cut her off with a raised hand. "None of that. You're here now, and you'll be cared for properly. That's just how things are." There was a finality to her tone that left no room for argument. Lily nodded and returned to her breakfast, unsure what to make of this kind efficiency. In the 3 months with the Hutchinsons, she'd learned that kindness always came with conditions, with expectations of work or gratitude that could never quite be satisfied. She waited for Martha to tell her what the conditions were here. Instead, Martha just sat in the chair Caleb had occupied the night before and watched the morning light move across the floor. "He's a good man, Mr. Rowan," Martha said after a while. "Doesn't talk much, keeps to himself, but he's fair. More than fair. Built this whole place from nothing." Lily absorbed this information, filing it away. "How long have you worked for him?" 10 years come autumn. He hired me when my husband passed, needed someone to manage the house, gave me a cottage of my own on the property, fair wages, and never once made me feel like I was anything less than valued." Martha paused, choosing her words carefully. "He understands what it means to be alone in the world, understands what it takes to survive it." "He told me his mother left him," Lily said quietly. Martha's expression tightened. "Did he now? That's more than he's told most people. He must see something of himself in you." "Is that good or bad?" "Neither. It just is." Martha stood, collecting the tray. "Now, let's see about those feet." Changing the bandages was an ordeal that left Lily breathless and sweating. The wounds had begun to close, Martha explained, but they were far from healed. Walking would be impossible for at least a week, maybe 2. Lily would need to stay in bed, let her body recover. "What happens after that?" Lily asked. Martha met her eyes. "That's between you and Mr. Rowan, but I'll tell you this, he doesn't do things halfway. If he's decided to help you, he'll help you properly. The question is what you want." "I want—" Lily stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. What did she want? Not to be abandoned again, not to be a burden, to be worth keeping. But those felt like impossible things, dreams too large for someone like her. "You don't have to know yet," Martha said gently. "Just focus on healing." After Martha left, Lily lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. The room was beautiful in a way she'd never experienced, not fancy, but clean and cared for, every detail considered. Someone had chosen that shade of blue for the walls. Someone had hung those curtains, placed that quilt on the bed, put fresh flowers in the vase on the dresser. Someone had made this room with the thought that it might matter to whoever stayed in it. The door opened again, and this time it was Caleb. He looked different in the morning light, younger somehow, though the hard edges were still there. He'd shaved and changed his shirt, but his eyes held the same fierce protectiveness she'd seen the day before. "Morning," he said, stopping just inside the doorway, as if unsure whether to come closer. "Martha says you're doing better." "Yes, sir." "Caleb." "Not sir." Lily nodded. "Caleb." He moved to the chair and sat, his large frame somehow looking uncomfortable in the delicate furniture. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Caleb leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I need to ask you some questions," he said, About the people who left you, the Hutchinsons. Lily felt her stomach tighten. Why? Because what they did was wrong, criminal, maybe, and because I need to know if they're going to come looking for you, trying to claim you back. They won't, Lily said with certainty. They made their choice. Maybe. But people have a way of changing their minds when they think there's something to gain from it. Caleb's voice was flat, matter of fact. If they find out you're here, on a successful ranch, being cared for, they might decide they want you back. Might claim they were coming back for you all along. The thought had never occurred to Lily, but she saw the truth in it immediately. Mrs. Hutchinson's calculating eyes, always assessing value and cost. If she thought there was advantage in reclaiming Lily, she'd do it without hesitation. What do I do? Lily asked, hating the fear in her voice. First, you tell me everything you know about them. Where they were headed, what they were running from, anything that might help me find them if I need to. So Lily told him. About Mr. Hutchinson's failed farm in Nebraska, the debts they were fleeing, the plan to start over in Oregon Territory where land was supposedly free and opportunities abundant. About Mrs. Hutchinson's sister in Portland who'd promised them a place to stay. About the 3 Hutchinson children, 2 boys and a girl, all younger than Lily, who'd looked at her with a mixture of pity and relief when their mother had told her to get down from the wagon. Caleb listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he sat back and was quiet for a long moment. Oregon's a long way off, he said finally. If they're headed there with purpose, they're not likely to turn back. But I'll make some inquiries, find out if anyone's seen their wagon pass through, and I'll talk to the sheriff, make sure there's a record of what happened. Will I have to leave? The question came out smaller than Lily intended. Caleb's expression softened. No, not unless that's what you want. Like I said last night, you can stay here as long as you need. But what would I do here? I can't just, I should work, earn my keep. You're 10 years old and you can barely walk. Right now, your job is to heal. And after that? Caleb seemed to consider this carefully. After that, we'll figure it out together. Maybe you help Martha in the house. Maybe you go to school. There's a schoolhouse in town, about an hour's ride. Maybe you just be a kid for a while, which it seems like you haven't had much chance to do. Lily stared at him, trying to find the trap in his words, the hidden condition, but his expression was open, honest. He meant what he said. Why? She asked. Why would you do all this for someone you don't know? Caleb was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ranch spread below. When I was 14, he said, I ran away from the ranch my mother sold me to. Ran with nothing but the clothes on my back and a stolen horse I meant to return once I got far enough away. I made it 3 days before the horse threw me and ran off. I was alone in the mountains with winter coming on. No food, no shelter, no plan. He paused, still looking out the window. I found a trapper's cabin, empty for the season. Broke in and survived on whatever scraps I could find, whatever I could trap or catch. I told myself I'd make it, that I was strong enough to survive anything. He turned to face her. But I wasn't. I got sick. Fever, like what took your father. I was dying in that cabin, too weak to move, certain that was where I'd end. What happened? Lily asked quietly. The trapper came back early, found me half dead on his floor. He could have thrown me out, could have turned me in for breaking and entering. Instead, he nursed me back to health. Taught me how to survive in the mountains, how to trap and hunt and read the weather. Kept me through that winter and into spring. Why did he do it? Caleb smiled, a sad expression that didn't reach his eyes. I asked him that once. He said, because I was young and stupid once too, and someone gave me a chance I didn't deserve. Figured I'd pass it on. He died the next winter. Avalanche took him while he was checking his trap lines. By then he had taught me enough that I could make it on my own. He returned to the chair and sat down, meeting Lily's eyes directly. I survived because someone stopped when they could have kept walking, because someone saw a stupid kid who'd made bad choices and decided to give him a chance anyway. He leaned forward. So when I saw you out there on that trail, when I had the choice to keep riding or turn back, there was no choice. Not really, because I know exactly what it feels like to be left behind, and I know what one person's kindness can mean. Lily felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them back. I'll be worth it, she said fiercely. I'll work hard and I won't complain and I'll... Lily, Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. You don't have to earn the right to be cared for. You don't have to prove you're worth keeping. You just have to heal and grow and be yourself. That's enough. The tears came then, hot and fast. 3 months of held-back grief and fear pouring out. Caleb didn't try to stop her or comfort her with empty words. He just sat there, solid and patient, letting her cry until she had nothing left. When the tears finally subsided, Lily wiped her face with the sleeve of the nightgown Martha had given her. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. You're entitled to cry after what you've been through." A knock sounded at the door, and Martha poked her head in. "The doctor's here," she said. Caleb stood. "I sent one of the hands to fetch him this morning. Figured your feet needed someone who knows what they're doing to look at them." The doctor was an older man named Hartley, gruff and efficient, with steady hands and no-nonsense manner. He unwrapped Lily's feet, examined them with clinical detachment, and made a series of disapproving sounds. "She walked on these?" he asked Caleb. "Until she couldn't anymore. Lucky she didn't get infection. Lucky she didn't damage the bones." He looked at Lily. "You're tougher than you look, girl. These will heal, but it'll take time. 2 weeks minimum before you should put weight on them, and even then you'll need to take it slow." He rebandaged the wounds with fresh dressings and left a supply of salve and clean wrappings with Martha. Before he left, he pulled Caleb aside. Lily couldn't hear what they said, but she saw the doctor's expression, concern mixed with something that might have been approval. After he was gone, Martha brought lunch on a tray and insisted Lily eat every bite. The afternoon stretched out long and quiet. Lily dozed, woke, dozed again. Each time she opened her eyes, she half expected to find herself back in the Hutchinson wagon, or worse, alone on the burning trail. But each time there was the blue room, the soft bed, the certainty of safety. Evening came, bringing Caleb back. He knocked softly and entered when she called out. "Brought you something," he said, holding up a stack of books. "Thought you might be going crazy with boredom by now." Lily's eyes widened. She'd learned to read from her father, who'd valued education even in their transient life, but books had been a luxury they couldn't afford. She reached for the stack with reverence. "These are yours?" she asked. "Some are. Some are from the town library. Martha's friend runs it. She sent over what she thought you might like." He set the books on the bedside table. "Can you read?" "Yes, my father taught me." "He did right by you then. Education's something no one can take away." Caleb settled into the chair. "Martha tells me you were asking about what happens next. About school." Lily nodded. "The schoolhouse is run by Miss Adelaide Porter. She's young, maybe 25, came out from Boston 3 years ago to teach. She's good at it too, tough but fair. I think you'd like her." "The Hutchinsons never sent me to school," Lily said. "Said they couldn't spare me from helping with chores." "Well, things are different here. School starts up again in 6 weeks, right after harvest. If you want to go, you'll go." "What if the other children—" Lily stopped, unsure how to voice her fear. "What if they— what? What if they ask questions about who I am, where I came from?" Caleb considered this. "They'll ask. That's human nature. But here's the thing, Lily, you get to decide what story you tell. You can tell them everything, or nothing, or something in between. That's your choice, not theirs." "What will you tell people?" "The truth. That I found you abandoned and brought you to my ranch to recover. That you're staying here for now. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made something in Lily's chest ease. She'd been carrying so much alone for so long, the weight of her father's death, the burden of being unwanted, the fear of what came next. The idea that someone might carry some of that weight with her felt almost too good to be true. "Caleb," she said. "Yeah?" "Thank you for everything." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "You're welcome, Lily." The days that followed fell into a pattern. Mornings brought Martha with breakfast and fresh bandages. Afternoons were spent reading the books Caleb had brought, adventure stories and fairy tales, and one thick volume about the settling of the West that was probably meant for someone older, but that Lily devoured anyway. Evenings, Caleb would stop by after his work was done, and they'd talk. Sometimes they talked about her father, and Caleb would listen to her stories with an attention that made her feel like James Carter had been someone important, someone worth remembering. Sometimes they talked about the ranch, and Caleb would explain how cattle operations worked, how he'd built his herd, the challenges of managing land and men and market prices. And sometimes, though not often, Caleb would talk about his own past, about the years he'd spent learning to survive, the jobs he'd worked, the money he'd saved, about the day he'd bought his first 100 acres, and how he'd stood in the middle of that empty land and sworn he'd make something of it, about the slow, hard process of building something lasting from nothing. Lily began to understand that Caleb Rowan wasn't just a wealthy rancher who'd happened to find her. He was someone who'd been exactly where she was, alone, abandoned, forced to survive by sheer will. And he'd done more than survive. He'd built something. If he could do it, maybe she could too. On the 8th day, Martha came in with her breakfast and a cautious smile. "Mr. Rowan asked if you felt up to visitors," she said. Lily's stomach clenched. "Who?" "Some of the ranch hands. They've been asking about you, wanting to know if you're all right. They're a good group, rough around the edges maybe, but decent men. But if you're not ready, I'll tell them no." Lily thought about this. Part of her wanted to stay hidden in this blue room forever, safe and separate from the world. But she'd been hiding long enough. "Okay," she said. "They can come." The men arrived that afternoon, 3 of them, cleaned up and clearly uncomfortable in the refined space of the main house. They stood in the doorway with their hats in their hands, looking anywhere but at Lily. "This here's James, Peter, and Tom," Martha said, introducing them. They worked the North Range mostly. James was young, maybe 19, with red hair and freckles. Peter was older, weathered, and quiet. Tom was somewhere in between, with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Miss Lily," James said awkwardly, "we just wanted to check that you were doing all right. The boss said you had a rough time of it." "I'm better now," Lily said. "Thank you for asking." "We brought you something," Tom said, nudging Peter forward. Peter produced a wooden carving from behind his back, a horse, small enough to fit in Lily's palm, with remarkable detail in the mane and muscles. He handed it to her with a gruff, "Figured you might want something to look at besides these walls." Lily took the carving with wonder. It was beautiful, the wood smooth and warm in her hand. "You made this?" Peter shrugged, embarrassed. "Whittle in the evenings, keeps my hands busy." "It's wonderful, thank you." The men relaxed slightly, the initial awkwardness fading. They told her about the ranch, about the cattle drive they'd finished last month, about the horse Peter was breaking for Caleb. They were careful not to ask questions about her past, but they included her in their stories as if she belonged there, as if her presence in that house was already an established fact. After they left, Martha sat on the edge of the bed and smiled. "See, I told you they were decent." "They were nice," Lily agreed, turning the carved horse over in her hands. "Are they all like that? The men who work here?" "Most of them. Mr. Rowan doesn't tolerate meanness or cruelty. Says life's hard enough without people making it harder for each other." Martha stood and collected the lunch tray. "He's built something good here, Lily. Not just a successful ranch, but a place where people are treated with dignity. That matters." After Martha left, Lily set the carved horse on the bedside table next to her books and thought about what it meant to build something good. Not just successful, but good. A place where people mattered. Her father had taught her to keep moving, to survive no matter what. But maybe surviving wasn't enough. Maybe the point was to build something worth surviving for. That night, Caleb came by later than usual. He looked tired, dust-covered from a long day's work, but he still stopped in to check on her. "Martha said the hands visited," he said, settling into his usual chair. "They were nice. Peter gave me this." She showed him the carved horse. Caleb smiled. "Peter's got a gift for that. He made the headboard in my room, carved the whole thing from a single piece of oak." "Why did you hire him?" Lily asked. "And the others?" "Different reasons for different men. Peter came to me 5 years ago, running from a bad situation in Kansas, needed work and a fresh start. James is a local boy whose father drinks too much, figured he needed a place where he'd be treated right. Tom worked for another ranch that went under, and I knew him to be reliable. So you gave them all chances, like the trapper gave you." Caleb's expression grew thoughtful. "I suppose I did. Never quite thought of it that way, but yeah." "Is that what you're doing with me? Giving me a chance?" "Maybe. Or maybe you're giving me one." Lily frowned. "I don't understand." Caleb leaned back in the chair, studying the ceiling. "I built this ranch from nothing. Built this house, these barns, these corrals. Employed good men, paid fair wages, did everything right. But it was all still empty. All still just me. Alone in rooms I'd made for a family I didn't have. He looked at her. And then there you were on that trail. And maybe I stopped for you because someone once stopped for me. Or maybe I stopped because I was tired of riding past things that mattered. Lily absorbed this slowly. You think I matter? I think everyone matters. I think every person abandoned on a trail, every kid sold for drinking money, every man running from a bad situation, they all matter. And I think when you get a chance to prove that, you take it. Even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky, and the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night drifted through the open window. Caleb? Lily said finally. Yeah? I'm glad you turned back. He smiled. Me too, Lily. Me too. 2 weeks after Caleb had found her on the burning trail, Lily took her first steps. Martha stood on one side, Caleb on the other, both ready to catch her if she fell. The bandages were finally off, revealing feet that were pink and tender but healing. Dr. Hartley had pronounced her ready to try walking, though he'd cautioned against too much too soon. Lily planted her right foot on the floor, felt the strange sensation of wood against skin that had been wrapped and protected for so long, and pushed herself up from the bed. Pain shot through her feet immediately, but it was manageable. Nothing like the tearing agony of those first steps on the burning trail. Easy, Caleb said, his hand steady on her elbow. Take your time. She took one step, then another. Her legs shook with the effort, muscles weak from 2 weeks of bed rest. But she stayed upright, moving slowly across the room to the window she'd been looking out of for days, wanting to see it from a standing position, wanting to claim that small victory. When she reached the window, she looked out at the ranch spread below. The corrals with their horses, the barns and outbuildings, the wide expanse of grassland rolling toward distant mountains. From this angle, she could see men working, moving cattle from one pasture to another. She could see the windmill turning, the vegetable garden behind the house where Martha grew tomatoes and beans and herbs. She could see the life of the place, the purposeful activity that marked every day. It's beautiful, she said quietly. It is, Caleb agreed, coming to stand beside her. Took me years to see it, though. When I first bought this land, all I saw was work, all the things that needed building, all the problems that needed solving. Took me a long time to stop and actually look at what I'd made. What changed? Nothing. Everything. I got older. Started realizing that if I never stopped to appreciate what I had, then what was the point of having it? Lily turned to look at him. Do you ever wish you'd done things differently? Built something else? Been someone else? Caleb considered this, his expression thoughtful. Sometimes, but wishing doesn't change anything. You make your choices, you live with them, and you try to make the next choice a little better than the last one. Martha appeared in the doorway with a knowing smile. Well, look at you standing on your own 2 feet. I'd say that calls for celebration. How about we get you downstairs for dinner tonight? Real dinner at the table, not a tray in bed. The thought filled Lily with both excitement and apprehension. She'd been in this blue room for 2 weeks, safe and separate from the larger world. Going downstairs meant entering the main house properly, meant being part of the household rather than a patient recovering in isolation. I'd like that, she said. Getting down the stairs was an ordeal that left her sweating and exhausted, but Lily refused to be carried. She took each step slowly, gripping the banister with white knuckles, Caleb hovering behind her ready to catch her if she stumbled. By the time she reached the bottom, her feet were throbbing and her legs felt like water, but she'd done it herself. The dining room was larger than she'd expected, with a long table that could seat 12 easily, but tonight it was set for just 3, her, Caleb, and Martha. The housekeeper had outdone herself, laying out a feast of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from the garden. Martha, you didn't have to, Caleb started, but she cut him off with a wave of her hand. Hush, the girl's been eating off a tray for 2 weeks. She deserves a proper meal. They sat down together, and for a moment Lily felt overwhelmed by the normalcy of it. A table set with care, food served with attention, people who seemed genuinely glad she was there. It was so far removed from the Hutchinson wagon, where she'd eaten scraps while they had proper portions, where every bite felt grudging. So, Martha said, passing the potatoes, Dr. Hartley says you're healing well. Another week or 2, and you should be able to walk without pain. Just in time for school, Caleb added. I talked to Miss Porter yesterday, told her about you. She's looking forward to having you in her class. Lily's hand froze halfway to her mouth. You talked to her? What did you say? That you're staying at the ranch, that you're smart and you know how to read, that you've been through some hard times but you're recovering. He met her eyes. I didn't tell her everything, just enough so she'd understand and be ready to help if you need it. What if... Lily stopped, searching for the right words. What if the other children ask questions? What if they know about the Hutchinsons, about what happened? Then you tell them it's none of their business, Martha said firmly. Or you tell them the truth. Or you tell them whatever you want. But you don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of what was done to you. Martha's right, Caleb said. What the Hutchinsons did, that's on them, not you. You survived. You kept moving when most people would have given up. That's nothing to be ashamed of. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The food was delicious, rich, and satisfying, and Lily found herself eating more than she had in months. Her stomach had shrunk during her time with the Hutchinsons, but it was slowly expanding again, accepting the abundance that came with being in Caleb's house. I've been thinking, Caleb said, setting down his fork, about what comes next. Long term, I mean. Lily's chest tightened. Here it came. The conditions, the expectations, the price for all this kindness. I want you to stay, Caleb said simply. Not just until you're healed. Not just until we figure something else out. I want you to stay here. Make this your home, if that's what you want. Lily stared at him, afraid to believe what she was hearing. But I'm nobody. I don't have anything to offer. You're a 10-year-old girl who deserves a home and a chance to grow up safe. That's all the reason needed. He leaned forward. I'm not asking you to decide right now. Think about it. See how you feel once you're stronger, once you've been to school, once you've had time to settle. But I want you to know the offer stands. This can be your home for as long as you want it to be. Martha was watching them both with suspiciously bright eyes. What the man's trying to say in his roundabout way is that we'd like to keep you, both of us. I'd like that, Lily said, her voice small but certain. I'd like to stay. Caleb's expression softened into something that might have been relief. Good. Then it's settled. But even as she said the words, even as she felt the warmth of their acceptance, a small voice in the back of Lily's mind whispered doubts. People had wanted to keep her before. Her father had loved her. The Hutchinsons had taken her in. And she'd still ended up abandoned on a burning trail. What made this different? What guarantee did she have that Caleb wouldn't change his mind, that circumstances wouldn't shift, that she wouldn't wake up one morning to find herself unwanted again? As if reading her thoughts, Caleb said quietly, I know trust doesn't come easy after what you've been through. I know words are just words until they're backed up by action. So I'm not asking you to trust me right now. I'm just asking you to give me the chance to earn it. Lily nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The next morning brought a visitor. Lily was sitting on the front porch, her feet propped up on a stool, when a wagon rolled up the drive. A woman climbed down, young and pretty, with dark hair pinned up neatly, and a practical dress that had seen better days. She spotted Lily and smiled. You must be Lily. I'm Adelaide Porter. I teach at the schoolhouse. Lily straightened, suddenly conscious of her faded dress and healing feet. Hello, Miss Porter. Please, call me Adelaide. Everyone does. She climbed the porch steps and settled into the chair beside Lily without waiting for an invitation. I've been hoping to meet you. Caleb speaks very highly of you. He does? He does. Says you're smart and brave, and you've got a good head on your shoulders. High praise from a man who doesn't give compliments lightly. Lily didn't know what to say to that, so she stayed quiet. Adelaide studied her for a moment, her expression kind but assessing. I hear you've had a difficult time. I won't pry into the details. That's your business. But I want you to know that when you come to school, you'll be treated just like every other student. No special treatment, no different expectations. You'll work hard, and you'll be held to the same standards as everyone else. Does that sound fair? Yes, ma'am? Good. Now tell me about your education so far. What have you studied? For the next hour, Adelaide asked her questions about reading, arithmetic, history, geography. Lily answered as best she could, explaining what her father had taught her, what she'd learned from the few books they'd owned. Adelaide listened carefully, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of approval. You're further along than I expected, Adelaide said finally. Your father did well by you. I think you'll fit in with the older students, the 12 and 13-year-olds. They're working on more advanced material, and I think you'll be challenged, but not overwhelmed. Older students? Lily's stomach dropped. But I'm only 10. Age doesn't always match ability. Some of my youngest students are my brightest, and some of my oldest are still struggling with basic concepts. I group by capability, not by years. Adelaide leaned forward. But I understand if that makes you nervous. Being the youngest in a group can be difficult. I don't want special treatment, Lily said quickly. I want to earn my place. Adelaide smiled. I had a feeling you'd say that. You remind me of myself at your age, determined to prove yourself, to show everyone you're worth more than they think. Is that bad? Not bad, just exhausting if you're not careful. Adelaide stood. School starts in 4 weeks. In the meantime, I've brought you some books to work through. Consider it preparation if you like, but also consider it permission to just be a child for a while. You've been through more than most people face in a lifetime. It's all right to rest. After Adelaide left, Lily sat with the stack of books in her lap and wondered if it really was possible to rest. She'd been running, literally and figuratively, for so long that she didn't know how to stop. Even here, safe on Caleb's porch, part of her was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when everything fell apart. Caleb found her there an hour later, still holding the books, staring out at the ranch without really seeing it. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling into the chair Adelaide had vacated. "Just thinking about school, about what comes next." "Nervous?" "A little. Adelaide says I'll be with the older students. What if they don't like me? What if they think I don't belong?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something I learned the hard way?" "Yes?" "There will always be people who think you don't belong. People who look at where you came from or what you've been through and decide you're less than them. You can spend your whole life trying to prove them wrong, or you can just live your life and let your actions speak for themselves. Is that what you did?" "Eventually. Took me longer than it should have. I spent years trying to prove I was worth something, trying to build this ranch big enough and successful enough that no one could question my value. But the thing is, the people who were going to judge me found reasons to do it anyway. And the people who saw my worth, they saw it from the beginning, before I had anything to prove it with." Lily absorbed this slowly. "So what should I do?" "Go to school. Do your best. Be yourself. And don't waste energy on people who've already decided not to like you. Focus on the ones who give you a fair chance." It was good advice, Lily knew, but it was easier said than done. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Each morning, Lily would walk a little more, building strength in her feet and legs. Each afternoon, she'd study from the books Adelaide had brought, working through arithmetic problems and history lessons. And each evening, she'd sit with Caleb and Martha, talking about the day, about the ranch, about nothing and everything. She began to venture beyond the main house, exploring the ranch on Caleb's arm. He showed her the horse barn, where a dozen animals stood in clean stalls, munching hay and swishing their tails. He introduced her to his foreman, a weathered man named Dutch, who'd been with him since the beginning. He walked her through the vegetable garden where Martha grew enough food to feed the household and then some. And slowly, Lily began to understand the scope of what Caleb had built. This wasn't just a successful ranch, it was a community. Men who worked here sent money back to their families. They had clean places to sleep, fair wages, and a boss who treated them with respect. The ranch supported the town too, buying supplies from local merchants, hiring hands when needed for seasonal work, providing a stable economic anchor for the whole region. Caleb had built something that mattered, and he was offering to let her be part of it. 3 weeks after her arrival, a commotion in the yard drew Lily to the front porch. A small boy was standing beside the corral, looking lost and frightened. He couldn't have been more than 8, with tangled blonde hair and clothes that hung loose on his thin frame. One of the ranch hands was crouched beside him, talking softly, but the boy seemed frozen. Caleb emerged from the barn and went straight to the child. Lily watched as he knelt down, making himself small and non-threatening, speaking in a voice too low for her to hear. The boy looked at him with wide, terrified eyes, but didn't run. After a few minutes, Caleb stood and guided the boy toward the house. As they approached the porch, Lily could see tear tracks on the child's dirty face. "Lily, this is Samuel," Caleb said. "Samuel, this is Lily. She's staying here at the ranch." Samuel looked at her but didn't speak. "He was found near the south boundary," Caleb continued, "wandering alone. He won't say much, but I get the sense he's running from something." Lily understood immediately. She saw herself in this boy's frightened eyes, in the way he held himself ready to bolt at any moment. She knew exactly what he was running from. Maybe not the specifics, but the feeling, the desperate need to escape something unbearable. "Hi, Samuel," she said gently. "Are you hungry?" The boy nodded. "Come on then. Martha makes the best food. She's been feeding me for weeks and I'm still not tired of it." She stood carefully, mindful of her still tender feet, and held out her hand. Samuel looked at it for a long moment, weighing the risk of trust. Then slowly, he reached out and took it. Martha took one look at Samuel and went into action. Within minutes, she had him seated at the kitchen table with a plate of food in front of him. He ate like someone who hadn't seen a proper meal in days, shoveling food into his mouth with desperate urgency. Caleb watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. When Samuel finally slowed down, Caleb pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked. "Samuel." "Samuel what?" The boy hesitated. "Just Samuel." "All right, just Samuel. Can you tell me where you came from?" "A farm. North of here?" "Your family's farm?" Samuel's face closed down. "No." "Someone else's farm, then? Were you working there?" The boy nodded. "And you ran away?" Another nod. Caleb leaned back in his chair, his voice staying gentle and even. "Were they treating you badly, the people on the farm?" Samuel's hands curled into fists on the table. "They beat me, said I was lazy, said I wasn't worth the food they gave me. Mr. Brennan said—" He stopped, his throat working. "He said he'd sell me to the mines if I didn't work harder." Lily felt her stomach turn. She'd heard about the mines. Brutal operations in the mountains where men died regularly and children fared even worse. The threat alone was enough to terrify. "How old are you, Samuel?" Caleb asked. 8, I think, maybe 9. "And you've been working this farm for how long?" "Since I was little. Since my parents died." Caleb's jaw tightened. "The Brennans took you in after your parents died?" "They bought me. From the orphanage. Paid $10. The casual way he said it, "bought me," made Lily want to cry. She knew that feeling, being treated as property rather than person, being valued only for what labor could be extracted. "Well, Samuel," Caleb said, "you're safe here. No one's going to beat you, and no one's going to sell you to any mines. You can stay as long as you need to." Samuel looked up at him with disbelief. "Really? Really? But I don't have any money. I can't pay you." "I'm not asking for payment. I'm just offering you a place to rest and recover. After that, we'll figure out what comes next." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back fiercely. "I can work. I'm a good worker, even though Mr. Brennan said I wasn't. I can do chores and help and—" "Samuel," Caleb interrupted gently, "you're 8 years old. Right now your job is to eat and sleep and be a kid. We'll worry about the rest later." That night, after Samuel had been given a bath and clean clothes and put to bed in one of the spare rooms, Lily found Caleb on the front porch. He was staring out at the dark ranch, his expression troubled. "You're going to keep him," Lily said. "It wasn't a question. If he wants to stay. If the Brennans don't come looking for him." "And if they do?" Caleb's voice went hard. "Then they'll have to go through me." Lily sat down beside him, pulling her shawl tighter against the cool evening air. "Is this what you meant when you said you knew what it felt like to be left behind?" "Yeah. Samuel's story is different from mine, different from yours. But the core is the same. A child alone in the world, told they're worthless, treated like they're disposable." He turned to look at her. "I can't save every abandoned child in Wyoming. I can't fix the system that creates situations like yours and Samuel's. But I can do something about the ones who end up on my land." "So you're just going to keep collecting strays?" Lily asked, and there was no judgment in her voice, just curiosity. "Maybe. Is that so bad?" "No," Lily said quietly. "I think it's exactly right." Over the next few days, Lily watched Samuel slowly emerge from his shell of fear. He followed Martha around the kitchen, helping with small tasks and eating steadily, his thin frame beginning to fill out. He shadowed Caleb during ranch work, watching everything with wide eyes. And he stuck close to Lily, seeming to find comfort in someone closer to his own age who understood what he'd been through. On the 4th day, as predicted, the Brennans came. Lily was in the yard with Samuel, showing him how to braid rope the way her father had taught her, when the wagon rolled up. The man who climbed down was tall and broad, with a florid face and mean eyes. His wife stayed in the wagon, pinch-faced and silent. "You," the man, Mr. Brennan, Lily assumed, said, pointing at Samuel. Get over here. We're going home. Samuel went pale and took a step backward. Caleb appeared from the barn, moving with deliberate calm. Can I help you? I'm here for my boy. He ran off 4 days ago. Heard he was here. Samuel is here, yes. He says you beat him and threatened to sell him to the mines. Brennan's face darkened. That's between me and him. I paid good money for that boy. He belongs to me. No one belongs to anyone, Caleb said, his voice dangerously quiet. And if you laid hands on a child in anger, then you're the one who broke the contract, not him. You can't keep him. I'll get the sheriff. Go ahead. I'll tell the sheriff about the bruises Samuel had when he got here, about the scars on his back from your belt, about an 8-year-old child so terrified he ran away into the wilderness rather than spend another day under your roof. Caleb took a step forward. You want to involve the law? We'll involve the law, but I don't think it'll go the way you expect. Brennan looked from Caleb to Samuel and back again. Whatever he saw in Caleb's face made him reconsider. The boy's more trouble than he's worth anyway, he muttered. You can keep him, but don't come crying to me when he disappoints you. He climbed back into his wagon and drove away without another word. Samuel stood frozen, watching the wagon disappear, his whole body trembling. He's really gone? Samuel whispered. He's really gone, Caleb confirmed, and he won't be back. Samuel turned to look at Caleb with something like awe. You stood up to him. No one ever stood up to him before. Someone should have stood up to him a long time ago. Caleb put a hand on Samuel's shoulder. You're safe now, and you'll stay safe. That's a promise. That night, Lily lay in her blue room and thought about promises, about the ones that had been broken and the ones that might actually hold. She thought about Samuel, sleeping peacefully for probably the first time in years. She thought about Caleb, who kept finding broken children and bringing them home. And she thought about what it meant to build something good. Not just successful, but good. A place where people were treated with dignity, where children were protected rather than exploited, where someone actually stood up when it mattered. This ranch wasn't just land and cattle and buildings. It was becoming something else, something that mattered in ways that had nothing to do with profit margins or property values. It was becoming a refuge. And Lily was beginning to believe she might actually be allowed to stay. School started on a crisp September morning with the smell of wood smoke in the air and the first hints of autumn gold touching the cottonwoods along the creek. Lily woke before dawn, her stomach churning with nerves. She'd laid out her clothes the night before, a new dress Martha had sewn for her, simple but well made, with a collar that sat neat against her throat. Her feet, finally healed, fit into proper shoes that Caleb had ordered from town. Samuel was already awake when she came downstairs, dressed in his own new clothes and looking equally terrified. They ate breakfast in silence while Martha fussed over them, packing lunches and checking their appearance one more time. You'll do fine, won't you? Martha said, smoothing Lily's hair. Both of you. Just remember what we talked about. Heads up, shoulders back, and don't let anyone make you feel small. Caleb drove them to town in the wagon, the three of them sitting together on the bench seat. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a white building with a bell tower and windows that caught the morning light. Already children were gathering in the yard, their voices carrying across the distance. Remember, Caleb said as he helped them down from the wagon, if anyone gives you trouble, you tell Miss Porter. And if Miss Porter can't handle it, you tell me. We'll be all right, Lily said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Caleb studied her face for a moment, then nodded. I know you will. I'll be back at 3 to pick you up. Lily took Samuel's hand and they walked together toward the schoolhouse. The other children stopped their games to watch them approach. Lily could feel their eyes assessing, judging, cataloging every detail. She kept her head up and her steps steady, the way Martha had taught her. Adelaide appeared in the doorway, ringing the bell. Good morning, everyone. Time to come inside. The schoolhouse interior was simple but clean, with rows of desks facing a blackboard and windows on both sides letting in natural light. Adelaide directed Samuel to sit with the younger children near the front, then guided Lily to a desk in the back where the older students sat. A girl with red braids looked Lily up and down and wrinkled her nose. You're the one staying at the Rowan Ranch, she said, making it sound like an accusation. Yes, Lily said evenly. My mother says you're an orphan. Says Mr. Rowan found you abandoned on the trail like a stray dog. Heat flooded Lily's face, but she kept her voice steady. Your mother's half right. I am an orphan, but I'm not a stray dog. Sounds like a stray dog to me. My mother says, Sarah, Adelaide's voice cut across the room, sharp and authoritative. That's enough. Take your seat and open your reader to page 15. Sarah subsided, but not before giving Lily a look that promised this conversation wasn't finished. Lily sat down at her assigned desk, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged her slate and books. The morning passed in a blur of recitations and arithmetic problems. Adelaide moved between the different age groups with practiced efficiency, keeping the younger children occupied while challenging the older ones. Lily found herself grateful for the books Adelaide had given her to study. She was able to keep up with the work, even excel at it in some cases. At lunch, the children scattered outside. Samuel stayed close to Lily as they found a spot under a tree. They were unwrapping their lunches when 3 boys approached, led by a stocky child who looked about 13. "So you're the charity cases," the boy said, the ones Rowan took in. "We're students here, same as you," Lily said. "Not the same at all. My father owns the general store. Sarah's father runs the bank. We're somebodies. You're nobodies who got lucky." Samuel shrank back, but Lily stood her ground. "Being somebody has nothing to do with who your father is. It has to do with who you choose to be." The boy laughed. "That's a nice thought. But out here, who your family is matters. And you don't have a family, do you?" "Yes, I do," Lily said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "I have Caleb and Martha and Samuel. That's my family. A hired man playing rancher and his housekeeper? That's not a family, that's Thomas Mitchell." Adelaide's voice rang out across the yard. "My office. Now!" Thomas went pale, but tried to maintain his bravado as he walked past Adelaide into the schoolhouse. The other boys scattered. Adelaide came over to where Lily and Samuel sat. "Are you all right?" she asked. "We're fine," Lily said. "Just getting to know our classmates." Adelaide's mouth twitched with something that might have been a smile. "Thomas is the mayor's son. He's used to being the biggest fish in a small pond. Don't let him get to you." "I won't." But the encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. It wasn't the insults themselves. She'd heard worse from Mrs. Hutchinson. It was the casual certainty in Thomas's voice when he'd said she was nobody. The way the other children had nodded along, accepting it as simple truth. That afternoon, Adelaide kept Lily after class. Samuel waited outside, sitting on the steps in the sunshine. "I wanted to talk to you about today," Adelaide said, settling into the chair behind her desk. "About Thomas and Sarah and what they said." "It's fine, I can handle it." "I'm sure you can, but you shouldn't have to." Adelaide leaned forward. "I grew up in Boston, in a wealthy family with all the advantages. When I decided to come west to teach, my family was horrified. They said I was throwing away my birthright, that I'd be nobody out here among the frontier rabble." She smiled. "They were half right. I did become nobody, nobody's daughter, nobody's wife, nobody's anything except myself. And I found that being nobody, according to their definition, meant I could be somebody on my own terms." "What does that have to do with me?" Lily asked. "Everything. Thomas and Sarah, they're trying to define you by what you lack. Family name, social standing, property. But you get to decide what defines you. Your intelligence defines you. Your courage defines you. The fact that you survived what would have killed most people defines you." Adelaide paused. "Don't let them write your story." "Right. You write it yourself." Lily thought about this on the ride home. Caleb asked about her day, and she gave him the abbreviated version, leaving out the worst of what Thomas had said. But Caleb was perceptive, and he didn't press when she went quiet. That night at dinner, Samuel told them everything. He recounted Thomas's words with perfect accuracy, his voice shaking with remembered hurt. Martha's face grew stormy, and Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to the mayor tomorrow," Caleb said. "No," Lily said quickly. "That'll just make it worse. Thomas will say we can't fight our own battles, that we need you to protect us." "You're children. You shouldn't have to fight these battles." "But we do have to, because if you fight them for us, it just proves we're what Thomas says we are. Charity cases who can't stand on our own." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just tired of being defined by what other people think I am." The weeks that followed were difficult but not impossible. Thomas and his friends kept their distance after Adelaide's intervention, but the whispers continued. Lily heard fragments of conversations that cut off when she approached. She saw the way some mothers pulled their children aside when she passed. She felt the weight of judgment that seemed to follow her everywhere in town. But she also found unexpected allies. A quiet girl named Emma started sitting with her and Samuel at lunch, explaining that her own father had died last year, and she knew what it felt like to be looked down on. Two brothers, recent immigrants from Germany, joined their group because they were tired of being mocked for their accents. A black boy named Marcus, whose family ran a small farm on the outskirts of town, gravitated toward them because he understood what it meant to be always on the outside. They formed their own small community within the larger school, bound together by their shared experience of not quite belonging. And slowly, Lily began to understand what Adelaide had meant about writing her own story. She couldn't control what people said about her, but she could control how she responded. She could work harder, study more, prove through her actions that she was worth more than the circumstances of her arrival. As autumn deepened into winter, the ranch itself began to change. Caleb started building an addition onto the main house, explaining that they needed more bedrooms. Martha ordered extra supplies from town, far more than a household of 4 would need, and Lily began to understand what was happening. The ranch was preparing for more children. She found Caleb in his office one evening, reviewing building plans. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" she asked. "Make this a place for children who have nowhere else to go." Caleb set down his pencil. "Thinking about it, what do you think?" "I think it's a big responsibility." "It is. I think people in town will have opinions." "They will." "I think some of those opinions will be ugly, no doubt." Caleb leaned back in his chair. "But I also think there are children out there, right now, in situations like you and Samuel were in. And if I have the means to help them, if I have the space and resources to give them a chance, then maybe I have an obligation to do it." "What does the law say?" Lily asked. "About taking in children who aren't yours?" "The law is complicated. There's no formal system out here for caring for orphans or abandoned children. Some towns have orphanages, but they're overcrowded and underfunded. Most kids like you and Samuel just fall through the cracks." He paused. "I've been talking to a lawyer in Cheyenne. He says if I establish this as a formal operation, if I follow certain guidelines and submit to inspections, I can create something legal and above board. A ranch that also serves as a home for displaced children. And if people object, then they object. But I own this land free and clear. I employ half the men in this county. And I pay my taxes on time and in full. That gives me a certain amount of leverage." Lily thought about this. "When I first got here, you said someone once should have stopped for you. Is this you stopping for everyone you couldn't help before?" Caleb smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just the right thing to do." The first test came in November, when a circuit judge arrived in town to hear cases. Among the items on his docket was a petition from a woman named Mrs. Crawford, claiming that Caleb Rowan was illegally harboring children who should be placed in proper institutional care. The petition specifically named Lily and Samuel. Caleb received the summons on a Tuesday. That evening, he gathered everyone in the dining room, Lily, Samuel, Martha, and Dutch, his foreman. "We have a hearing on Friday," Caleb explained. "Mrs. Crawford is arguing that I'm not a suitable guardian for children, that Lily and Samuel should be removed and placed elsewhere." "Where elsewhere?" Martha demanded. "She runs a boarding house for children in Cheyenne, calls it an orphanage, but from what I've heard, it's more like a workhouse. Children do labor in exchange for minimal food and shelter." Lily felt her stomach drop. "Can she do that? Can she take us?" "She can try. Whether she'll succeed is another matter." Caleb looked at each of them in turn. "I want you to understand what this means. If we fight this, it'll be public. Everyone in town will know your stories. There will be questions, testimony, maybe even things said that are painful to hear. If you want to avoid that, if you want to just go quietly and avoid the spectacle, I'll understand." "No," Lily said immediately. "We fight." Samuel nodded vigorously. "I'm not going to any workhouse. I'd run away again first." "Then we fight," Caleb said, "and we fight to win." The days leading up to the hearing were tense. Caleb spent long hours with his lawyer preparing their case. Adelaide came to the ranch to help Lily and Samuel practice their testimony, coaching them on how to answer questions clearly and truthfully without being intimidated. "The judge will ask you about your life before the ranch," Adelaide explained. "He'll want to know if you're happy here, if you're being treated well. Just tell the truth, that's all you need to do." Friday came too quickly. Lily wore her best dress and tried to keep her hands from shaking as they rode into town. The courthouse was packed. Apparently half the county had turned out to watch the proceedings. Lily saw Thomas and his parents, saw Sarah's family, saw shopkeepers and ranchers and people she didn't recognize. She also saw Emma and her mother, Marcus and his family, the German brothers and their father. They'd come to support her, and the sight of their friendly faces in the crowd gave her courage. Mrs. Crawford was a severe woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they landed on. She sat with her lawyer, a thin man with a pinched face, and looked at Lily and Samuel like they were merchandise she intended to acquire. The judge, an older man named Thornton, called the court to order. Mrs. Crawford's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, we're here today because Mr. Rowan has taken it upon himself to collect children without any legal authority or proper oversight. He's created a situation where minors are living in his household with no formal guardianship arrangements, no verification of their well-being, and no assurance that they're receiving proper moral instruction." "Mr. Rowan has a lawyer," the judge said dryly. "Perhaps we should hear from him." Caleb's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Harrison from Cheyenne, stood. "Your Honor, my client found a child dying of heat exposure on his property. He provided medical care, shelter, and protection. Later, a second child arrived, fleeing abuse. Again, my client provided safety. These aren't the actions of someone collecting children. These are the actions of a decent human being responding to emergencies." "Emergencies that have resulted in children living in his household for months," Mrs. Crawford's lawyer countered. "Without any legal framework, without any oversight. For all we know, these children are being exploited, put to work on the ranch." "They're 10 and 8 years old," Harrison interrupted. "They attend school full-time. They have their own rooms, proper clothing, adequate food. There's no exploitation happening here." The judge raised a hand. "I'd like to hear from the children themselves. Miss Carter, would you approach the bench?" Lily's legs felt like water as she stood and walked to the front of the courtroom. The judge looked down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Miss Carter, can you tell me in your own words how you came to be at Mr. Rowan's ranch?" Lily took a breath and told her story. She explained about her father's death, about the Hutchinsons taking her in and then abandoning her. She described the heat, the long walk, the moment of collapse. And she told them about Caleb turning back, about waking up safe, about the weeks of healing and the choice to stay. "And are you happy there?" the judge asked. "Yes, sir." "Has anyone at the ranch mistreated you or asked you to do inappropriate work?" "No, sir. I help with small chores because I want to, not because I have to. And I go to school every day." "What about you, young man?" The judge turned to Samuel. "Tell me your story." Samuel's voice was quieter than Lily's, but no less firm. He told about the Brennans, about the beatings and threats, about running away in desperation. He told about finding the ranch, about Caleb protecting him when Mr. Brennan came to take him back. "And if I were to send you to Mrs. Crawford's establishment in Cheyenne, how would you feel about that?" the judge asked. Samuel's eyes widened with fear. "Please don't. I'll be good. I'll work hard. I'll do anything. Just please don't send me away." The judge's expression softened. "No one's going to send you anywhere you don't want to go, son. Sit down." He turned to Mrs. Crawford. "Madam, what exactly is your interest in these children?" Mrs. Crawford stood. "Your Honor, I run a Christian establishment for displaced youth. I provide structure, discipline, and moral instruction. These children would benefit from a proper institutional environment rather than the questionable oversight of a bachelor rancher." "I see. And how many children are currently in your care?" 23. "And how are they housed?" "In dormitories? Boys on one side, girls on the other?" "How many to a room?" Mrs. Crawford hesitated. 8 or 10, depending on age. "And their education?" "They receive Bible instruction daily. The older children learn trades appropriate to their station." "So no formal schooling." "Formal schooling is a luxury, Your Honor. These children need practical skills." The judge made a note. "And Mr. Rowan's operation, you object to it because?" "Because it's irregular. Because there's no guarantee these children are receiving proper moral guidance. Because a ranch is no place for children to be raised." "I grew up on a ranch," the judge said mildly. "Turned out fine." A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom. Mrs. Crawford's face tightened. "Furthermore," she continued, "Mr. Rowan is unmarried. It's inappropriate for him to be housing children, particularly a young girl without a proper female presence." "Mrs. Santos serves as housekeeper and female guardian," Harrison interjected. "She lives on the property and oversees the children's daily care." The judge looked at Martha. "Mrs. Santos, is that accurate?" Martha stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I've been with Mr. Rowan for 10 years. These children are as well cared for as any in the territory. Better than most, if I'm being honest. And you're comfortable with the arrangement? Completely. Mr. Rowan is a good man who does right by everyone in his employ and under his care. These children are safe, healthy, and happy. I'd stake my reputation on it. The judge nodded and turned back to Mrs. Crawford. It seems to me, madam, that your objection is based more on principle than on any actual evidence of harm or neglect. These children are attending school, receiving proper care, and by their own testimony are happy where they are. I see no reason to disrupt that. But, Your Honor, however, the judge continued, I agree that the current arrangement is irregular. Mr. Rowan, I understand you're planning to formalize this operation? Caleb stood. Yes, Your Honor. I'm working with legal counsel to establish proper guardianship arrangements and submit to regular inspections. Good. I'm going to grant temporary guardianship of both children to you, subject to review in 6 months. During that time, I expect you to file the proper paperwork and establish a legal framework for your operation. Mrs. Crawford, if you have evidence of actual abuse or neglect at that time, you may petition for review. But absent such evidence, these children will remain where they are. Case dismissed. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Lily felt the tension drain from her body so completely she almost fell. Caleb caught her elbow, steadying her. You did good, he said quietly. Both of you. Outside the courthouse, people clustered in groups, talking in low voices. Some looked disapproving, others merely curious. But Emma and Marcus pushed through the crowd to hug Lily, and the German brothers clapped Samuel on the back. You stood up to her, Emma said with awe. You stood up to Mrs. Crawford and the judge and everyone. We just told the truth, Lily said. Sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do. On the ride home, Samuel fell asleep against Lily's shoulder, exhausted from the stress. Martha sat beside Caleb on the driver's bench, and they talked in low voices about what came next. Lily stared out at the darkening landscape and thought about the judge's words. Temporary guardianship. Subject to review. Nothing was permanent yet. Nothing was guaranteed. But it was a start. It was permission to stay, to build something, to prove that this unconventional arrangement could work. When they reached the ranch, Caleb carried Samuel to bed while Lily helped Martha prepare a late supper. The kitchen was warm and filled with the smell of fresh bread, and for the first time since the summons had arrived, Lily felt like she could breathe properly. You were very brave today, Martha said as she sliced the bread. I was terrified. Brave doesn't mean not scared. Brave means being scared and doing it anyway. Caleb appeared in the doorway. Samuel's asleep. I think today took everything out of him. It took everything out of all of us, Martha said. But we won. We won the battle, Caleb corrected. The war is just beginning. Mrs. Crawford isn't going to give up. And there will be others like her, people who think they know better, who think children like Lily and Samuel belong in institutions. Then we'll fight them too, Lily said. Every single one, if we have to. Caleb smiled. You sound pretty sure about that. I am sure. Because this place, this ranch, this home, it matters. What you're trying to build matters, and I want to be part of it. You already are part of it, Lily. You and Samuel both. That night, lying in her blue room, Lily thought about everything that had happened since the day Caleb had found her on the burning trail. She thought about how close she'd come to dying, how easily she could have been just another forgotten child who didn't survive. But someone had stopped. Someone had turned back. And that one decision had changed everything. Now the ranch was changing too, transforming from a successful cattle operation into something more, a refuge for children who had nowhere else to go. A place where being nobody, according to the world's definition, meant you could become somebody on your own terms. The addition to the main house was nearly finished. Soon there would be more bedrooms, more space for children who needed it. And Lily understood with sudden clarity that she wanted to be here when they arrived. She wanted to be the one who helped them settle in, who showed them they were safe, who proved through her own presence that survival was possible and that sometimes people actually kept the promises they made. She'd survived the burning trail. She'd survived the hearing, and she was going to survive whatever came next, because that's what you did when someone gave you a chance worth fighting for. You kept moving. And you built something that mattered. Winter came hard that year, sweeping down from the mountains with snow that piled high against the barn doors and wind that howled through the cottonwoods. The addition to the main house was finished just before the first major storm, 4 new bedrooms with sturdy beds and windows that looked out over the ranch. Caleb had painted each room a different color: soft green, pale yellow, warm gray, dusty rose, giving each space its own character, its own invitation to whoever might need it. The bedrooms didn't stay empty long. A girl named Anna arrived in early December, brought by the sheriff who'd found her living in an abandoned cabin after her grandmother died. She was 12, silent and wary, with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything and trust nothing. Martha settled her in the green room and Lily tried to talk to her, but Anna responded only in monosyllables, keeping her thoughts locked away behind walls that looked unbreachable. 2 weeks later, twin boys showed up, Marcus and Matthew, age 9, whose father had died in a mining accident and whose mother had succumbed to grief and whiskey, leaving them to fend for themselves. They were small and scrappy, quick to fight each other, and quicker to defend each other against anyone else. Caleb put them in the gray room and told them the rules. No fighting in the house, chores before play, and school every single day. Then came Rosa, a 7-year-old whose parents had died of cholera, leaving her in the care of an uncle who drank away what little money they had. The sheriff brought her in January, wrapped in a blanket so thin it was nearly transparent, her lips blue from cold. Martha tucked her into the yellow room and spent hours getting her warm again, feeding her broth, and speaking to her in Spanish until the terror finally left her eyes. By February, the ranch household had grown from 4 to 9. The dining table that had once seemed too large now felt exactly right, filled with children's voices and the clatter of plates. Martha cooked enormous meals and still complained there was never enough food. The schoolhouse in town could barely accommodate all the new students, and Adelaide had to get creative with her lesson plans to manage the different ages and abilities. The town watched this transformation with a mixture of fascination and suspicion. Some people, like Emma's mother and the families of Lily's school friends, openly supported what Caleb was doing. They brought donations, clothes their children had outgrown, books, blankets, preserved food. Others, like Thomas's father, the mayor, and Mrs. Crawford's allies, grumbled about propriety and warned that Caleb was creating a haven for troublemakers and strays. "Let them grumble," Caleb said one evening at dinner, after the mayor had stopped by to express his concerns. "We're not breaking any laws, we're not hurting anyone. We're just giving children a place to be children." "The mayor says people are worried," Lily said. "He says a ranch full of orphans will drive down property values, make the town look desperate." "The mayor's worried about the wrong things," Martha said firmly. "Property values matter less than children's lives." But Lily could see the strain on Caleb's face, the way the criticism weighed on him, even as he tried to brush it off. The ranch was successful enough to support the additional children financially, but the social cost was becoming harder to ignore. Invitations that had once come regularly to town events, to neighboring ranchers' gatherings, had slowed to a trickle. Dutch reported that some of the ranch hands were catching grief in town for working for that charity operation. Even Adelaide faced questions about whether it was appropriate to teach those Rowan children alongside respectable families' sons and daughters. The breaking point came in March, when the bank denied Caleb's application for a loan to expand his cattle operation. The loan officer, Sarah's father, was apologetic but firm. "It's not about your creditworthiness, Caleb. Your finances are solid, but the board is concerned about the, irregular nature of your household. They worry it indicates instability, poor judgment." Caleb had come home that evening with his jaw set and his eyes hard. At dinner, he barely spoke. After the children went to bed, Lily found him on the porch, staring out at the dark ranch. "You're thinking about stopping," she said. It wasn't a question. Caleb didn't deny it. "I'm thinking about what happens if I can't expand the herd, if I can't get the credit I need to operate effectively, if the ranch starts failing because I chose to help children instead of maintaining my reputation. Would you really stop? Send us away?" "No." The word came quickly, firmly. "Never, but I might have to make different choices going forward. Maybe stop taking in new children. Maybe scale back." Lily sat down beside him. "When you found me on that trail, you said someone should have stopped for you. Do you still believe that?" "Of course." "Then you already know the answer. You can't stop now just because it's hard. You can't close the doors because people are judging you, because if you do, then the next child who needs help won't have anywhere to go." Caleb looked at her, and in the moonlight she could see the conflict on his face. The practical rancher who'd built an empire through careful decisions warring with the abandoned boy who knew what it meant to be turned away. "When did you get so wise?" he asked, echoing the question he'd asked months ago. "I learned from you," Lily said simply. You taught me that survival isn't enough, that you have to build something worth surviving for. The next morning, Caleb rode into town and came back with Adelaide. They closeted themselves in his office for hours while the children did their chores and Martha prepared lunch. When they finally emerged, Caleb looked tired but determined. "Gather everyone," he told Martha. "I want to talk to all the children." They assembled in the living room, all 7 children ranging from Rosa at 7 to Anna at 12. Lily and Samuel sat together on the sofa, the twins sprawled on the floor, Anna in the corner chair with her knees drawn up, and Rosa on Martha's lap. Caleb stood in front of them, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Then he took a breath and began. "I want to tell you all a story. When I was 7 years old, my mother sold me to a ranch for $20 and a bottle of whiskey. The rancher worked me hard, beat me when I didn't move fast enough, and made it clear I was worth less than his horses. When I was 14, I ran away. I survived, barely, and I spent the next 20 years building this ranch from nothing. I told myself I was proving I was worth something, that I mattered." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "But the truth is, I was still that 7-year-old boy, still trying to earn the right to exist, still believing that my value came from what I could build or achieve. It wasn't until Lily asked me why I'd turned back for her that I understood. I was worth something the day I was born, not the day I bought my first acre of land. And so are all of you." Rosa squirmed in Martha's lap. "What does that mean?" "It means you don't have to earn the right to be here. You don't have to prove you're worth keeping. You're here because you're you, and that's enough." Caleb's voice grew firmer. "There are people in town who think this ranch should be just a ranch, who think I should focus on cattle and profits and maintaining my reputation. And maybe they're right that it would be easier. But easy isn't always right." "So what are you going to do?" Matthew asked. "I'm going to formalize this operation legally and properly. Adelaide's been helping me research what that looks like. We're going to petition the territorial government to recognize this as an official home for displaced children. We're going to submit to inspections, keep detailed records, and prove that children can be raised well outside of institutions like Mrs. Crawford's." "What if they say no?" Anna spoke for the first time in weeks, her voice raspy from disuse. "Then we appeal. And if that doesn't work, we find another way. Because I'm not sending any of you away. This is your home, and it's going to stay your home." Lily felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, the kind that came from relief and gratitude and the fierce certainty that this man meant what he said. "Now," Caleb continued, "this isn't going to be easy. There will be inspections and interviews and people asking questions. Some folks in town are going to be difficult, but we're going to face it together, and we're going to prove that family isn't just blood. It's choice. It's commitment. It's showing up day after day and choosing to care." "Like you chose to turn back for Lily," Samuel said. "Exactly like that." Over the following months, Caleb worked with Adelaide and his lawyer to transform the ranch into something unprecedented in Wyoming territory. A privately funded home for displaced children that operated outside the traditional orphanage system. They drafted bylaws, established oversight procedures, and created educational requirements. Caleb hired a part-time teacher to supplement Adelaide's work, ensuring the children received robust schooling. He brought in a doctor monthly to check on everyone's health. He opened the books to regular audits, proving the operation was financially sound. The territorial inspector came in May, a stern woman named Mrs. Harrison who spent 3 days examining every aspect of the ranch. She interviewed each child privately, checked the bedrooms and common spaces, reviewed the educational curriculum, and questioned Caleb's qualifications and motivations. When she finished, she sat with Caleb in his office and delivered her verdict. "Mr. Rowan, I came here expecting to find a well-meaning but chaotic operation, probably doing more harm than good. What I found instead is the most comprehensive and thoughtful child welfare program I've seen in this territory. These children are healthy, educated, and genuinely happy. You've created something remarkable." Caleb released a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "So you'll approve the license?" "I'll recommend approval, yes, but I have one concern." She leaned forward. "This operation relies entirely on you, your money, your land, your commitment. What happens if something happens to you? If you die or become incapacitated? These children would be left vulnerable again." It was a valid concern, one that had kept Caleb awake at night. "I've been thinking about that," he admitted. "I need to establish a trust, create a legal structure that survives me. I'd recommend it strongly, and I'd also recommend finding a way to involve the community more directly." The more people who have a stake in this operation's success, the harder it will be for critics to shut it down. That conversation led to a town meeting in June. Caleb stood before a packed room and presented his vision. Not just a ranch, but a community resource. He proposed a board of overseers made up of respected town members who would provide oversight and accountability. He offered to accept donations of time and resources from anyone who wanted to contribute. And he challenged the town to decide what kind of place they wanted to be. "We can be a community that turns away children in need," he said, "that insists on institutional solutions and traditional family structures above all else. Or we can be a community that recognizes sometimes traditional approaches fail, and we need new solutions. We can be a place where children like Lily and Samuel and Anna and all the rest have a chance to survive and thrive." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Emma's mother stood. "I'd like to volunteer for the oversight board," she said. "And I'd like to donate funds for winter clothing." Marcus's father rose next. "Our farm doesn't have much, but we can contribute vegetables from our harvest." One by one, people stood. Not everyone. Thomas's father remained seated, his face stony, and several others looked uncomfortable, but enough to matter. Adelaide stood last. "I'd like to propose that the school establish a scholarship fund specifically for children from the Rowan Ranch, to ensure they have the same opportunities as every other student." By the end of the meeting, Caleb had a board, a network of donors, and a community mandate to continue his work. It wasn't universal support. It would never be that. But it was enough to build on. That summer, Lily turned 11. Martha baked a cake and the whole household celebrated, something that had never happened for Lily before. Her father had loved her, but birthday celebrations had been luxuries they couldn't afford. The Hutchinsons certainly hadn't marked the occasion. But here, surrounded by this chosen family, Lily felt something she'd never quite experienced before. She felt valued, not for what she could do or provide, but simply for existing. "Make a wish," Rosa said excitedly, bouncing in her chair. Lily looked around the table at the faces watching her. Samuel and Anna, the twins, Rosa, Martha, and Adelaide who'd stayed for dinner, and Caleb at the head of the table. She looked at this family they'd built from broken pieces, this home they'd created from necessity and choice. She closed her eyes and wished for the only thing that mattered, that this would last, that the doors would stay open, that no child would ever be turned away. When she blew out the candles, everyone cheered. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were good. More children came, some staying for months, others for years. Some were eventually reunited with family members who got back on their feet. Others aged out and went off to make their own ways in the world, carrying with them the knowledge that they'd been worth fighting for. Lily grew into a young woman who was fierce and capable, who'd learned that survival was important, but kindness mattered more. She became the heart of the household, the one who welcomed new arrivals and showed them the ropes, who proved through her own presence that healing was possible and that trust could be rebuilt. Samuel grew tall and quiet, with his father's gift for working with horses. He became Caleb's right hand on the ranch, managing the livestock with a gentle competence that earned respect from the hands. Anna eventually found her voice again, discovered a talent for numbers, and became the household's informal accountant, tracking expenses and donations with meticulous precision. The twins mellowed with time and structure, channeling their energy into ranch work and school. Rosa blossomed into a cheerful, talkative child who seemed determined to make up for the silence of her early years. And Caleb aged, not rapidly but noticeably, his hair going gray at the temples and lines deepening around his eyes. But he also softened, the hard edges worn smooth by years of children's laughter and Martha's steady presence, and the daily proof that what he'd built mattered. On a hot summer day, 15 years after Caleb had found Lily on the burning trail, he called her into his office. She was 25 now, a school teacher herself, having studied under Adelaide and taken over some of the ranch's educational duties. She entered to find Caleb at his desk, looking older than she'd ever seen him, but also strangely peaceful. "Sit down, Lily. There's something I need to talk to you about." She sat, worry immediately flooding through her. "Are you all right? Is something wrong?" "I'm dying," he said simply. "Cancer. The doctor says I have 6 months, maybe less." The words hit her like a physical blow. No, there must be something, treatment, or..." "There's nothing, and honestly, I'm all right with it." He held up a hand to forestall her protest. "I've had a good life, a better life than I had any right to expect. I've seen children grow up safe and healthy. I've seen this ranch become something that matters. That's more than enough." Lily felt tears streaming down her face. "What about us? What about the children? We need you. You don't need me. You never really did. Caleb pulled out a folder thick with legal documents. I've spent the last year updating the trust that manages the ranch. When I die, the operation will continue. The board will provide oversight, the trust will provide funding, and you, Lily, will run the day-to-day operations. Me? You're ready. You've been ready for years. You know these children better than anyone. You understand what they need because you've been exactly where they are. He pushed the folder across the desk. The ranch is yours, not as property. It belongs to the trust, which ensures it can never be sold or turned to other purposes, but as responsibility, as purpose, as the thing you choose to build your life around. Lily took the folder with shaking hands. I don't know if I can do this without you. Yes, you can. Because I didn't teach you to survive. You already knew that. I just taught you what to survive for. Caleb's smile was gentle. And you taught me something too. You taught me that the point of surviving isn't to prove your worth. It's to use what you've built to help others survive too. Caleb died peacefully that autumn, on a day when the cottonwoods were burning gold and the air smelled of wood smoke and coming winter. He spent his last week surrounded by the children he'd saved, some now adults, some still young, and when he took his final breath, it was with Lily holding one hand and Martha holding the other. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, in a spot he'd chosen himself. The whole town came to the funeral, even those who'd opposed him. Even Thomas's father, looking old and humbled, came to pay his respects. At the graveside, Lily stood before the assembled crowd and spoke. Caleb Rowan was abandoned by his mother when he was 7 years old. He survived abuse and hardship that would have broken most people. He could have let that experience make him hard and bitter. Instead, he chose to make it his mission that no child would face what he faced alone. He built this ranch into a refuge. He opened his doors and his heart, and he changed the lives of every child who came through here. She looked out at the faces watching her, children she'd grown up with, children who'd come after, adults who'd aged out but returned for this. Samuel standing tall and steady, Anna with her account books tucked under her arm even now, the twins, the families, the community members who'd eventually come to support the operation. Caleb used to say that someone once should have stopped for him. That's why he stopped for me, and for all of us. But here's what I learned from him. It's not enough to just stop. You have to build something. You have to create a place where people can heal and grow and become who they're meant to be. That's what Caleb did. And that's what we're going to keep doing. Martha squeezed her hand. Adelaide smiled through tears. And Lily knew, with absolute certainty, that this work would continue. The doors would stay open. The children would keep coming. And she would be here to welcome them, just as Caleb had welcomed her. The years continued to pass, measured in seasons and harvests, and the steady rhythm of children arriving and growing and sometimes leaving. Lily ran the ranch with the same fierce dedication Caleb had shown, but with her own touch, softer in some ways, more practical in others. She married eventually, a quiet rancher from a neighboring spread who understood her commitment to the children and supported it fully. They had children of their own who grew up alongside the other children in a household where family was defined by choice rather than blood. The ranch prospered. The trust grew, supplemented by donations and careful management. The community that had once viewed the operation with suspicion came to see it as a point of pride, a progressive approach to child welfare that other territories began to emulate. And through it all, Lily remembered. She remembered the heat of that trail, the burning ground beneath her bleeding feet. She remembered the moment of collapse, the certainty that she was dying. And she remembered the sound of hooves, the shadow falling across her face, the strong hands lifting her to safety. She remembered Caleb's voice, rough with shock and something deeper. I've got you. You're all right now. Those words had changed everything. One decision by one man to turn back instead of riding on. One choice to see a dying child as worth saving. One commitment to prove that survival could lead to something more than just existence. On a summer day 30 years after Caleb had found her, Lily stood on the porch of the ranch and watched a wagon approach. A sheriff climbed down, and behind him a small girl emerged, maybe 9 or 10, painfully thin, with frightened eyes and the careful movements of someone who'd learned not to draw attention. The sheriff explained the situation. Parents dead, no family willing to take her, the girl days away from being sent to an overcrowded institution in Cheyenne. Lily listened, her heart aching with recognition. When the sheriff left, Lily knelt down to the girl's level. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Hannah," the girl whispered. I'm Lily. Welcome home, Hannah. Hannah looked around at the ranch, the house with its many colored bedrooms, the barns and corrals, the children playing in the yard who stopped to wave. Is this really home? It is if you want it to be. No one's going to make you leave. No one's going to tell you you're not worth keeping. You're safe here. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why would you do this for someone you don't know? Lily smiled, and in that moment she heard Caleb's voice as clearly as if he stood beside her. Because someone once did it for me. Because every child deserves a place to land when the world knocks them down. Because survival is just the beginning. After that, you have to build something worth surviving for. She held out her hand, and after a moment, Hannah took it. Together, they walked toward the house, toward the sounds of laughter and life, toward the future that Caleb had built with one decision to turn back. The trail behind them was empty now, the burning heat of summer fading into comfortable warmth. But the choice that had changed everything remained, rippling forward through time, touching lives in ways that could never be fully measured. One person stopping when others rode on. One decision to see value where others saw burden. One commitment to prove that abandoned didn't mean forgotten, and that sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. The door stood open. The children were gathering for dinner, and Lily led Hannah inside, continuing the work that had saved her own life all those years ago. The work of showing children that they mattered, that they were worth fighting for, that there was always someone willing to stop, always someone willing to turn back, always a home waiting if you could just keep moving long enough to reach it.